We are live.
Hello. We are live. Excellent. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the latest Keyfactor and Thales webinar, where we're going to be covering securing the future, achieving quantum resilience with PKI and HSM integration. So joining us today are experts in their field from both Keyfactor and Thales. First of all, from Keyfactor, we have the Chief PKI Officer, Tomas Gustavsson, and we also have from Thales, Blair Canavan, the Director of Alliances. Gentlemen, welcome. We also had Phil joining us today, but unfortunately, due to last-minute circumstances, he's not able to join us. It's very unfortunate. We will still run through the Thales PKI Health Check. Gentlemen, welcome. Thank you for joining. And really, I guess, first of all, when you think of quantum resilience, PKI, HSM integration, what's the first thing that comes to mind?
Well, for me, it's the underlying security that runs the world as we know it, which almost no one knows about. It's super critical, but it's hiding in the bushes.
And Blair, what do you think?
We're going to talk about this in great detail, but the number one thing for me is interoperability and the assurance that those interoperabilities proceed and persist as we move into the next realm of PQC readiness. So I can't be more adamant that our work together with Keyfactor and with our customer base stems from the fact that we have been doing this for decades, and we can't drop the ball. This is the most critical and most crucial turning point. So for us and all of us on the call today, that's what we're going to stress: is how do we make this work and continue to work for the long term.
Amazing. Fantastic. Thank you for kind of running through that very briefly. So I'm very conscious of time. Appreciate everyone is very busy. So quick run through the agenda. We're going to be focusing initially on the quantum challenge and why organizations need to act now. That'll be predominantly Thomas and Blair talking. They're going to be running through why PKI is critical infrastructure and where the biggest risks lie, and also the urgency, why post-quantum readiness is so important, and the key mitigation strategies. How organizations can act now with PKI, HSMs, and our expert guidance. And also, later on, we'll be running through building a quantum resilient PKI, the Thales PKI Health Check. Blair will give a quick summary of this one. We'll be looking at assessing cryptographic risk, how to strengthen security, and also how Thales can help support organizations in their journey. And at the end, give a quick summary and some key takeaways. So further to that, gentlemen, there is a quantum challenge. Why must organizations act now? Why is it so urgent?
Okay, to start with the short background on why it's urgent for when it comes to PKI is because PKI is today's really critical infrastructure. I've been working with PKI for 30 years, and in the beginning it was, used for specific use cases, but today it's used for everything. Some things that we know, like document signing, smart cards, which are obvious when you use it. But it's also used for everything else which is not visible to normal users. Not everyone knows that there's PKI, working in the background when you pass a border control with your passport, or that robots in factories have certificates and everything is controlled remotely, etc. Which means that if PKI would break, it's more or less life as we know it today would cease to exist. And with that, I turn over to Blair to talk about what might happen.
Yeah, to say PQC and PKI are joined at the hip is an understatement. And the fact that PKI is the underpinning of our entire digital infrastructure, it's been that way for 30 plus years. Thomas, you and I have been around in this space for a very long time. To look back at when people, just the conversation about what is PKI, and even to this day, PKI is not vernacular that a lot of people kick around, but now you start to drill into your infrastructure to see how you utilize your digital certificates and how you utilize certificate authorities, and where they're everywhere. And that aspect means that there is no one immune to the fact that your organization relies on everything from a certificate that's being used for any web browsers, or a certificate being used for doing business together with another entity, or a certificate being used to ensure that who you're dealing with is in fact who you want to deal with. And so that affects every industry. So the financial services industry, of course, manufacturing, everything from healthcare, everything government defense, everybody utilizes this. And we've even heard, Tomas, you and I have talked about a lot of people, I guess, predicted the demise of, or, well, we'll replace PKI with
Yep.
stronger authentication or better use of identity and access management and so on. No, it's all woven together. In fact, now we're seeing even more so how something as simple as a machine identity, or something like what we discussed last week about code signing and software development, the integrity of those things relies on PKI. And that's what I want to make with this impactful statement is it's growing. It's growing, and it's going to continue to grow as we rely more and more on the digital infrastructure. Imagine critical infrastructure 30 years ago, 40 years ago. Highways, transportation, water, electricity. Well, we all know that the internet is absolutely critical infrastructure. Hey, there we are. The cameras just popped on. So what I wanted to relay is that we're all in this together. And so whether or not whatever business line you're in, you might not be aware of it, but your organization relies on this. And so what we want to do is make sure that people understand is we're taking PQC to the PKI infrastructure. I think this is my slide too, right, Joss?
Yes, indeed.
Yeah. So one of the best parts about being working at Thales is learning more about our businesses. And this isn't a commercial or a plug. It's just a reality that we are consumers of the same technology that we also provide with our friends at Keyfactor. In fact, Keyfactor and Thales work together in a lot of business lines together across Thales. So you see, for example, on the IoT side, or what's at risk side, you might not be aware that, again, Thales might not be a household name, but you might not be aware that we have a satellite division. We build satellites, and we do some really cool stuff there. We're also part of, you see the airplane there. We build very intricate infotainment systems that rely very much so on the fact that PKI and the integrity of those technologies come together. The thermostat on the right, or even medical devices that Keyfactor and Thales have been working together to ensure that something is absolutely life and death critical, like a Dexcom insulin pump and also the actual wearable patch, is making sure that those devices remain and the integrity remains within those devices long term. So this means that PQC affects us today. This is actually making sure that things that are being built today that have a long life, some will call them stranded assets. For example, you can't pull a satellite out of orbit, bring it back down, drop a new firmware, or update some libraries on it. You just don't have that luxury. So what we're building here is making sure that whatever it is, whether it be in a car, whether it be in a satellite, a plane, like I said, a thermostat, it's not just about denial of service prevention. It's not just about the integrity of making sure it works right. It could be as much as life and death. So what we're seeing now is the attack surface is it's always been there, that people are going to look for ways to compromise. Some for profit, some for just the fact that they want to take something, again, that we rely on, and that denial of service or that interruption is where adversaries can and will continue to look at. So we're concerned about that, and we should be. So making sure that those updates are the integrity, and they're absolutely 110% certain that they come from the vendor, and that there's no man in the middle attack, and making sure that how we feed and update those products from a security point of view, and just a regular how that operational aspect works. We work together to make sure that these are all authenticated properly. So this is one of the things that we do very much every day here with our friends at Keyfactor and across the Thales enterprise. All right, I'm going to move that next slide for us here. So this is, we wish that we could do this in real time to some aspects. Thomas, we were just talking about this before we got on the call this morning, but if you haven't been paying attention over the last few months, regardless of whether it's the last few years that you've been dabbling in post-quantum, we've all seen some of these latest advancements from various vendors around the world. For those who are not familiar with IBM, they have what's called a quantum chip, and you'll see the chandelier. You'll see this massive cooling mechanism, like a chandelier, hovering over a small chipset. When I say small, not a tiny chipset, micro size. We're talking about a 1 or 2 inch by 2 inch device. This is the latest that you'll see from IBM, that we're starting to move into the next realm of possible capabilities. What does that mean? What it means is that it allows organizations to understand a little bit better now that we are progressing so quickly in quantum development that you better pay attention. Why? Well, because when those quantum chipsets get to arguably a 5 to 10,000 error-free qubit range, that renders current RSA 2048 or RSA asymmetric algorithms, ECC elliptic curve algorithms, running Shor's algorithm useless. They will break through in a matter of minutes. So a lot of speculation has been back and forthing us. Well, that's 10, 20 years away. So much so that you probably saw our friends at NVIDIA, Jensen Huang, the CEO, saying, it's 15 to 30 years away from now. Thomas, we talked about this a lot. That's not true. In fact, so much so that they actually retracted their comments and didn't realize, or I shouldn't say Jensen might not have realized, that another group or within the NVIDIA team is actually working on delivering various capabilities to run those algorithms that we rely on today at a much higher performance, not to prevent, for example, a quantum computer rendering it, but again, the performance aspect of running what we have today at a much, much higher value. So I think we could talk about that all day long, but it also came back that maybe this quantum computing realm is closer than we think. And this is what I also often say, and we talk about this, Thomas, that very much so we get people speculating on when quantum day is going to come. And none of us have that crystal ball. But what I always say is, do not bet against humanity and its capabilities. We saw what the Deepseek capable release was a few weeks ago that caught the entire world off guard to some extent. Others will say, I knew this was coming for a year, but the general population didn't realize that the Chinese engineering team using NVIDIA was able to come up with a performance and a capability with Deepseek that rivaled anything that we've done in the last 10, 15 years in AI. So there's a parallel in terms of where technologies are moving. We very much see the quantum computing platforms and AI in a very race to the latest, race to the greatest. So I feel like we're almost there. And then, of course, we have the banking communities and the defense communities around the world coming together and saying, we're not going to speculate anymore. We're going to prevent, or should I say, we're going to prepare and make a commitment, not only to ourselves, but to our customers, that we are going to do the best that we possibly can to become quantum resilient, in the sense of a cryptographically relevant quantum computer that could render what we use as our security infrastructure irrelevant. And so that was a long way to say is we embrace the aspect of what quantum computing will do for us on the good side, much like AI, but we also be very careful of the dark side, which could be used, as we know, to render current cryptography obsolete. Do you want to say anything about that, Thomas? That was a lot that I just
Yeah, you didn't even mention the latest Microsoft announcement. Was it last week even? About the Majorana topological core, a new processor for quantum computers, just highlighting how fast this development is going and how the community is getting more and more scared about the actual timeline.
And that's a great point to raise, that as we were putting these slides together weeks ago, this is how quickly things have changed. To your point is I can't pronounce it right, Majorana. So this comes, by the way, not from just Microsoft. This comes from the CEO, Satya, from Microsoft, making this announcement. And I think to add to that is, it's not just the fact that they are running just a, quote, 8-qubit chipset. What this is just a demonstration, much like Willow, from Google, much like others. But what they demonstrated was they have a path to 1 million qubits. And so what that means is it's like saying, well, just make it faster. How hard could that be? This is a major announcement in the world of quantum computing, because they can now see a path based on the technology they have, so they can now scale to 1 million. And I think that's really super relevant for a lot of people. Again, those who would like to speculate against or speculate for, they're making a bold statement that they will be in this very shortly, within years. And what do I mean by years? We're starting to see speculation that we could be within a much shorter window for that. So I'm going to hand this back to you. And I see that Phil was able to join us now, and I hope he's got his. Are you there, Phil, to jump in anytime? I don't want to.
I'm not sure Phil is going to be available. He is in our chat, but unfortunately, I don't think he's around. But we will get him in if we can.
All right, we'll do our best.
We'll continue. Well, the good thing or the bad thing, you could say, is that we don't have to speculate, at least us who develop these solutions and most customers who are putting them to place, because, regardless who you trust, Gartner says you have to stop trusting conventional asymmetric crypto around before 2030. NIST, which affects not only government industry, but also most other regulated industry worldwide, will deprecate RSA, ECDSA, and FDSA 2030. With deprecation, thus, it only means that they consider it unsafe to use, and it's, well, definitely high time to move away. IBM, who Blair just mentioned as one of those who builds quantum computer, has a roadmap around 2034 or around there, when they think they will be scaling to that level when it's possible. And then in 2035, NIST will actually disallow RSA, ECDSA, and FDSA. So, regardless if it's broken by then or not, everyone who relies on NIST standards, which are, for example, FIPS certified hardware security modules, which every industry requires today, will have to do something by then.
Well, I'll even add to your point that we've had this conversation about the window, Thomas, that Deepseek again is a great example, where, for example, they were, and I say they, if you're familiar with Stargate, this was the OpenAI community saying, we're going to set aside 500 billion to do this, to come up with what would be considered the latest, greatest. I'm not suggesting that that's no longer the case, but when Deepseek came out and said we had done it for 6 million, we all went, no way. It came back and said, I think it was 1.6 billion. But again, those factors, those magnitudes, I should say, of 500 billion versus what you could do with 1.6 billion, we're starting to see them. I'm not suggesting Majorana or Marjorana, I can't pronounce that silly, but what we're all understanding is, what if it were tomorrow or next year or the year after? What if that timeline shifts from right to left? This is what we're getting across today is, have you started? Have you set anything in place from a plan? Because if you rely on these dates, unlike Y2K, we had a fixed date and we right to left and we all sat down and figured out the ways that we were going to adjust accordingly. This is unfortunately a timeline that really doesn't have we don't have comfort with this timeline.
Exactly, and that, regardless of who you listen to, doesn't only have to be Blair and me, but if you're working in telecom or financial industry or government, there's lots of trade organizations or in all of these verticals who come out with recommendations for preparing for post-quantum cryptography. And all of them basically say the same: start now. Timeline is not far away. Another thing all of them emphasize is crypto agility, that you have to do update, or your solutions have to be updatable to new quantum safe cryptography and roots of trust. Putting that into practical terms, it pretty much says that if you're buying new stuff or procuring, require crypto agility by the vendors, updatability to quantum safe algorithms. And if you're developing something in-house, if it's not crypto agile and it's not, if you're developing it now and it's not prepared for the quantum safe future, stop development and go back to the drawing board. And there's lots of things which all of these different reports have in common, that you have to do data classification in order to prioritize your migration, because you're realistically not going to be able to do it all, at least in the larger organizations, until 2030 or 2035. And you need an inventory to know what you have, and both what you know and what you don't know. Do some work on that. If we go into PKI specifics, there are a bunch of migration strategies. So, but the two which are most well at least standardized today, which you can do today if you want to, is what we call here a transitional migration. If you control your ecosystem, you can, in parallel to your current PKI, set up a new quantum safe PKI and then distribute those root CAs to devices and machines that know about quantum safe algorithms and take it from there. But there are also things like hybrid cryptography or hybrid PKI, where you can set up a new, replace your classic PKI with a hybrid PKI, which has both a classic algorithm and a quantum safe algorithms, and then you can start using that, distributing it to devices which are also not aware of new quantum safe algorithms, but once they become, they will be able to use the new things. So there are other options as well, which are not fully standardized yet, but which will come in the future, which only emphasizes the need for crypto agility. And so if you want to know where we are now, the algorithms and the ACVP testing, which stands for automated cryptography validation program testing, is stable. So that means that all vendors who do things actually test against the same test vectors, and it's interoperable when you start putting things out there. Products, HSMs come out, and if anyone was playing with the early draft algorithms, those are removed by now, or have to remove them and move to FIPS standards, which is where the coming years will take us. Just a brief on Keyfactor, of course. What we bring to the table is Keyfactor command, which helps with inventory of PKI cryptographic algorithms. We have the bouncy castle cryptographic library, which is for building applications in Java and C#, which support all NIST post-quantum algorithms or connections to actually run the algorithms in hardware security modules, but create certificates, sign messages, or whatever you want from your actual applications that you build yourself. Creating post-quantum certificates and PKIs with EDBCA, both pure and hybrid, using MLDSA, LMS, and Falcon, which is still a draft algorithm set to be standardized later this year. Sign code and other artifacts with post-quantum algorithms. And of course, a part of the crypto agility future is automation, to be able to reissue and manage roots of trust and all these things. And since we're talking about PKI and hardware security modules, one of the things which is super critical is that all PKI and digital signature solutions in practice or in production use hardware security modules, which is of course one of the things that we work closely with Thales with and have done so for decades by now. And there are a bunch of different hardware security modules out there, which suit different purposes, like PCI HSMs, which we use a lot of to network HSMs, and cloud-based, which so you select which suits your use case, but they all have a little bit different characteristics. So of course, standards are being updated for post-quantum algorithms and usage for hardware security modules. So things are there, and interoperability testing is working. So from our PKI and hardware security module point of view, we are there to do our part in migrating to a post-quantum secure future.
Amazing. Excellent. Thank you. Thank you, guys. So I guess really the next section we wanted to cover was regarding building a quantum resilient PKI, the Thales PKI Health Check. Now, originally this was going to be covered by Phil. Unfortunately, a bit of technical issues, so unfortunately it's not around. Blair, would you be able to run through even some of the basics of this so we could give our audience a little understanding of how Thales can help with this topic?
Absolutely. And if you can hear me, I just turned my microphone back on. I'll do my best to, and I'm a big believer in a lot of these simple premises or tenets of building out a quantum safe, or quite frankly, what you already have with PKI and migrating to quantum safe PKI is you'll often hear the term hygiene, crypto hygiene. And so we're all familiar that you really should be following best practices. And this goes back decades where Thomas and myself and others, when we started the early days with PKI, just the notion of why do you have an HSM was lost on many. Because if you have a strong algorithm, why worry about where the keys are? As long as they're encrypted, they're fine. And then we realized that if your last line of defense is a crypto algorithm, as opposed to physical containment of keys and the actual operations that are run, we realized that the organizations around the world became very, very comfortable that the actual hygiene of their PKI relied on the software and the hardware together. And the simplest way to look at that is when someone asks you where the keys are, you point to a device. And they say, well, do the keys ever leave that device? No. So there's never any discussion about where those keys are outside of that box. There's never discussion about how they're managed or how they're accessed, because there's all these mechanisms built in. So this is understanding that cryptography is not just the software, it's the combination of software and hardware, making the integrity of the PKI as resilient as it is. So this crown jewels that you often hear is if, and again, I go back almost 30 years to, actually I go back 30 years to the beginning of Luna, which was in the early days, not really designed necessarily for protecting the certificate authority root keys. It was actually to protect the end user, their digital certificates, their PKI certificates that were issued to them, say, for example, in an access card for at that time, the Canadian government. And as it moved into the realm of PKI, we realized that we need to protect the crown jewels. It's not just the users, it's the actual root that is used to sign. So basically the master plates for printing money is what PKI root keys really are. So this is all about best practices. This is understanding that those things have been in place for well over almost 3 decades. And these are also managed and authorized and audited by all the major firms around the world, including Deloitte and PwC and many others that will attest to the fact that these PKIs are built properly. So we don't see any arguments anymore in terms of how roots are established or how they're done or where those keys are. But we are still, to this day, making sure that people understand why we operate the way we operate. And again, it's a lot about technology to some people, but it's really about the process. It's about the people that do the implementation that follow the same best practices over year over year. There's another aspect of PKI Health Check, and I won't go into the details that Phil would do, but they are best practice guidelines to understand how is your PKI distributed, how is it managed. Do you have multiple PKIs? Do you have distributed PKI? Do you have federated PKI? This is way outside of my comfort zone, and this is where Thomas knows way more than me. But Thomas, maybe you can chime in about what you would see as, from a health check point of view, why this is an opportunity to look at your infrastructure and understand how you're utilizing PKI.
Yeah, because I think it's really, we saw it as well. I had it actually on the crypto agility slide. You have to do new things. It's an opportunity to go through and make sure that your policies are sound and secure, and that you can, now's your chance to get rid of old craft. If you have, every organization have a backpack of old stuff that you probably want to get rid of. So this is your chance, and there is so much good practice here, like the NCSC guidelines, etc., that you can now take an opportunity to go through your system as you build out the new capabilities.
Excellent. I'm just making sure we don't run out of time, and we'll plow through a few more of these quick context points. So this, again, when we get into the delivery of a health check, and this is something that our Thales counterparts within Phil's team can do, is understanding that we're going to identify the key individuals that are building and maintaining these delicate infrastructures, critical infrastructures. So this comes into working with the stakeholders and the C-level organization, letting them know that we're working on this for the following reasons, and making sure that Thales will come in and provide that capability and that know-how. Generating this report, I'm actually going top to right, and it should be at the bottom there, but the predefined documentation is making sure that you have all your ducks in a row. And often as simple as, a certificate statement, or I always forget these words, Thomas, it's been a while, but certificate practice statement and all these other things, right? Do we have those things in place, or did we do it 20 years ago and nobody's dusted off that old document? You'll find a lot of things that maybe are lackluster. And this is, again, why we talk about this as this is an opportunity as you're going to earthquake proof your existing infrastructure with PQC resilience. You want to make sure that you're doing all these things to provide this really essentially a what's next. What are the next steps? This could be thrown into a PQC readiness assessment practice, or get started in that realm. But this is something that Thales has been doing for large infrastructure around the world for many, many years.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not a quick patch. It's a long-term strategy, which is why it's so beneficial to do it thoroughly.
Absolutely. So I don't know if, Joss, you want to take this slide and wrap us up and maybe get into some questions, or how you'd like to proceed. But
absolutely. So I'll give a quick summary of what we've talked about so far. Apologies, anyone who's had to drop. Appreciate that it's busy for everyone, and we've just got past time. So we will answer some questions, and obviously this talk is on demand, so feel free to join when you need to. So really, the quick summary of what we've covered today. We've looked at how PKI is critical infrastructure, that it's embedded across industries, the risks are rising, especially in authenticated software, and how action is urgent. The short window that we have to prepare for post-quantum threats, and how now is the time to plan, and also Keyfactor solutions in terms of what help we can offer via PKIs, HSMs, and securing digital trust. Now, the PKI PQC lab is linked on the page here. It's in the links documents as well on this web talk. So please feel free to have a look at that and check that out in more detail to find out more. And also the Thales Health Check, as Blair was kindly referring to there. So where we were talking about how it's described as an MOT, which for people who aren't in the UK, it's like a tune-up for your PKI implementation. Identifying security gaps, ensuring compliance, preparing for post-quantum threats, assessing PKI against 12 critical areas to keep infrastructure secure. So to find out more about that, the link is on the screen there. Again, it's linked in the meeting documents. So just go there, click on that link, and you'll be able to find out a whole lot more. And finally, really, just connect with our experts here. We've got Thomas, we've got Blair. Phil, unfortunately, wasn't able to join today, but any questions you have, or you want to reach out directly to them, they want to know about your organization's concerns and challenges because they're the experts. They know what to advise. So feel free to add them. And without further ado, appreciate we've gone over time, but we will answer some questions. Really, I guess the main one I'd bring up first is Martin has asked a question. It's quite a long question here, but I'll quickly summarize. He's mentioned the gap in Microsoft's PQC support, especially for MS ADECS, but also Windows 11, supporting some PQA since 2022, but no clear updates for the server-side PKI. And he's wondering if setting up a Microsoft PKI requires having open SSL as an immediate CA. Notes the lack of CNG provides for PQC when using HSM. I mean, Blair, Thomas, do either of you want to kind of take any of that?
Thomas, it's up to you. Yeah. I know you know this.
Well, of course, yes. We see, say specifically if we talk about ADCS, right? It's lagging behind more and more. It seems less and less like a future-proof solution, especially when it comes to quantum safe cryptography, which is why, of course, what we do can be a full replacement of ADCS. So you don't need to go to OpenSSL. You can get, cloud-ready, containerized, modern deployment options on-premise cloud with all PQ-ready HSM integration, from the joint team here. So we're doing a lot of work in that.
And I'll add that as Thomas mentioned, HSMs, we're open to the fact that we work with a large ecosystem, both with our competitors, and Thomas the same. It's a very large ecosystem of vendors, and that vendor community includes Microsoft. So we've seen the same thing, that there's a bit of a lag between ACDS and the market. This could be an opportunity to pivot. It could be an opportunity to, again, segue into an open environment, an open development environment, EJBCA from Keyfactor, working with the standard-based capabilities they provide. The good news is whether our HSMs continue and will continue to support all of the PQC algorithms in firmware. And this is absolutely critical regardless of the PKI that's been implemented. We support the entire spectrum of PKI vendors around the world. So I think we'll be in good shape, but we can't push the needle or with regards to Microsoft at this point, but we're hoping to see some changes in the next year or so.
Amazing. Great. Thanks for that reply. And one more question, and apologies if I make a mistake with this name. Jao Rodolfo Vieira Silva has asked, in terms of hybrid, do you see any future in signing X509 certificates using two PKIs, such as cross-signed certificates, one with ECC, RCA, and the other with PQC? Which initiative on this way we can follow to be updated? Which of you would like to take that?
Yeah, I can start. So there are a bunch of initiatives when it comes to hybrid PKI, as I mentioned, which are mostly, one that is the only standardized one today is called X509 alternative signatures and the keys, which is a part of the X509 standard, but it's also a draft in the IETF, actually. There are other initiatives within the IETF, which ends up at RFCs, like Composite and Chameleon. So the IETF is a good place to follow. And I think cross-signing, which isn't hybrid per se, but of course you can cross-sign classic cryptography PKIs with the hybrid or with the quantum safe, etc. So I think definitely as we'll start to see more larger scale migrations in larger ecosystems, which is not, single use case ecosystems or where people don't control everything. I think we're going to see a huge range of different things where actually cross-signing is a good observation, which I definitely think we will see. I think there's going to be place for all of these different aspects during demigration phase until we come out in the other end where all RSA and EC based PKIs expire and we're set to be fully quantum safe.
Amazing. Wonderful. Thank you, everyone. Really appreciate you all joining. Thank you, Thomas. Thank you, Blair. And look forward to the next one. We'll definitely run another one. So thank you very much, everyone, for joining, and look forward to seeing you again next time.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.